Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us this Saturday morning. I always look forward to these town halls because I get to hear directly from you and answer your questions. Today's town hall is focused on small businesses because they have been for the last year and continue to be hurting due to the impacts of COVID. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by Carl Knobloch, who is the District Director of the Small Business Administration's Richmond District Office, and Eric Bird, who's the manager of the Loudoun Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, in Leesburg. In December, we passed a bipartisan relief package that delivers emergency relief to Virginia families and small businesses during the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. That legislation included $325 billion in aid for the hardest hit small businesses, including a $284 billion for another round of forgivable Paycheck Protection Program loans. And the second draw PPP loans are now open. We'll discuss how your business can get a second draw loan and answer questions that we've received from constituents. And I'm proud to announce that I just introduced my bipartisan bill, the Fairness for Craft Beverage Producers Act. The targeted assistance that was included in our last relief deal to help restaurants and bars who've been hardest hit by COVID left out breweries, wineries, and distilleries who similarly rely on in-person sales at tap rooms and tasting rooms. Now, a constituent made me aware of that issue, and I took action immediately. My bill would allow these craft beverage producers to be eligible for a larger maximum loan amount in the second draw PPP and extended debt relief on other SBA loans that they may have. As the founder of the Congressional Agritourism Caucus, I'm proud to support initiatives like this that directly benefit businesses in Virginia 10, especially our small businesses. Now, I want to talk very briefly about vaccines because I know that this is top of mind for every American right now. Vaccination is one of the best tools we have to help put this pandemic behind us. The responsibility for distributing the vaccine and issuing guidance for who is eligible falls to our state and local government leaders. I voted to pass the bipartisan COVID relief bill in December, which included $29 billion of federal money for vaccine procurement, and I'm fighting to help get Virginia the resources we need to distribute the vaccine safely, effectively, and equitably. Our House committees have been hard at work moving forward with the American Rescue Plan Relief Bill, which will include additional funding for vaccines, as well as additional small business aid, extended unemployment benefits and rental assistance, money to help schools reopen safely, expanded paid leave, and much, much more. My team and I have compiled a resource page on my website to help answer your vaccine questions. So visit wexton.house.gov/vaccine to see a list of local health departments and resources to find out if you're eligible to get vaccinated now, and where you can go to make an appointment or get on a wait list in your county and city. Now, I'd like to take a moment to toss it to my guests to introduce themselves. I want to remind everyone that if you have questions about second draw PPP or other small business assistance programs, please leave a comment on the live stream and we'll get to as many as we can. Carl, let's start with you. If you could just take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience at home.
Yes, thank you so much, Congresswoman Wexton. Yes, Carl Knobloch from the Small Business Administration, Richmond District Office, cover basically almost all of Virginia. And the thing is, we've heard from many businesses related to the challenges they face through this whole process, and what the Congress has passed with the Payroll Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the tools with that, and then the upcoming one, Shuttered Venue Opportunity Grant. Those are totally open to talk about, and any other challenges you may be facing that we can assist, where they've offered the other tools with our other loan programs to create extensions, so you don't have to make those payments to free up your capital so you can use it for other purposes, to keep your employees employed and things like that. So, Congressman, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining us today. Eric, if you just take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience at home.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us. We're always happy to help get the word out to the public. So I'm Eric Bird. I manage the local Small Business Development Center in Loudoun County. We're part of a statewide network of centers that I think we have 27 centers around the state. So there's one near you that is happy to help you with your small business. We're a grant-funded business assistance program funded at the federal level by the SBA and at local levels by your localities. what we do is we offer small businesses help in getting started and in growing and operating their business and anything they need. And for the last 12 months or so, we have been focusing on helping businesses walk through the assistance data and figure out what they're eligible for, how to apply. That includes all of the federal programs, but also any state level or even local level programs. So we're happy to help you with whatever it is that's going on with your business right now to help you figure out how to survive this very strange time in business. And I'm happy to talk to any of that if you have questions. And we want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with your local SBDC to get some one-on-one help if you need that with your business.
What a fantastic resource you guys provide. That's great. So just to kick us off, I'd like to talk a little bit about this second draw PPP loan program, which has already been kicked off. Carl, could you just discuss a little bit just the overview of what the Paycheck Protection Program does and how this program might differ from the first rounds and just, who's eligible and what the restrictions are?
Sure. At first, I want to give kudos for the changes that were made in the second round. Really helped out the businesses a lot. So kudos to Congress about that. The big change is if you didn't get one the first round, you still can get one this round. And the thing is that it expanded the payroll opportunity. So now you can include if you provide group life insurance, disability, dental, vision can be included in your payroll costs, besides like health insurance and bonuses and things like that. The other thing, which was really important, is the part of what we call operations, where before the original was just the utilities, the rent, the lease on, or excuse me, not a lease, but the interest on a mortgage, but now expanded. So, you can do your operations. If you were damaged during the civil unrest during the summer and your insurance didn't cover it all, you can use it for that. If you had to do upgrades to your computer system to become more online, if you had to add a drive-through operation, all those things have been included now that you can actually use those funds for that. So really helped out immensely to give more opportunities. You still have to keep the 60-40 split. 60% has to go to payroll to take care of our employees, and 40% basically can be used for operation aspects with that. Now also they've created that companies that got one the first time can get one the second time now, a second draw if they've used all their funds up from the first draw. And the nice thing about this, which I think was a really nice caveat that they added, was for the accommodations and restaurant industry, where the factor for the other industries is 2.5. This is 3.5, which gives them greater revenue opportunities to kind of help their business get back on their feet.
Yep, that multiplier is so important for the restaurant and entertainment industry, which obviously has been hit harder than any other and doesn't have specialized bailouts like the airline industry does and other big guys. So yeah, that was something that was really important to us. And that's what I'm trying to do actually through this craft beverage act, through my bipartisan bill, to bring them up with those restaurants and entertainment venues, because they've been impacted similarly. So this is one of the things. Thank you for your compliments about the improvements we made to the legislation. That came from what we heard from constituents about the issues with the rollout and everything the first time. So we do try to learn from our mistakes and improve the legislation as we move forward, and hopefully people will be able to benefit from this. Now, Carl, are these loans still forgivable to the same extent that the other ones were?
Yes, they're still forgivable. And like I said, the program goes until March 31st, 2021.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, Eric, what are you hearing from small businesses in Virginia 10 about what programs have helped them and what the challenges are that they've been facing, and what are some of the things that you've been doing to help?
So the interesting thing about this is that not all businesses or industries are affected the same way. Obviously, there are certain industries that are affected more directly, but then there's this ripple effect that we see going out from some of those. So because of the public health situation, a lot of the the shutdowns and the the regulations and restrictions on the social distancing and how many people you can have and that kind of thing. That has slowed things down for a lot of businesses, but that also has slowed things down for the businesses that service those businesses. So for one example, at the state level, there was a grant that was made possible by the CARES Act grants that initially targeted just the businesses that were part of the governor's order to shut down. But then they realized, as we started talking about it, that there's also all these companies whose that's their customer. And so they were able to expand out the grant to be able to also apply to those businesses as well. Generally speaking, everybody's hurting to a certain degree because activity is just so down right now, either because of uncertainty or because of some of the actual public health situation and restrictions. So businesses have been unbelievably resilient in figuring out ways to be creative to continue to do business. Now, right now, this has become more of a challenge, especially for those retail and the restaurant, hospitality, food service businesses, because it's cold weather. So when the weather is warmer, then it's easier for them to expand and do outside activities, and that enables us to maintain the social distancing. That's much more difficult when it's, the cold weather we've had and the ice and the snow, although they're still being very resilient, which is actually why some of the provisions of the second PPP program and the legislation were useful and important, because it helped make some of those alterations to their infrastructure, say buying heaters and putting up plexiglass and changing their facility, a forgivable expense under the PPP program. That was extremely helpful for a lot of people, I think. So the other thing that we are seeing is that one of the things that I wanted to highlight about the change in the new legislation, there were also some things that were changed that will help people with their taxes, which, by the way, everybody's working on right now. And there was some changes made to clarify what the rules are at the federal level about what is an expense, what is income. And those changes were positive. We were very happy to see those changes, that the PPP forgiveness is not counted as income, and the expenses that you normally would have to expend, even though they're part of the forgivable loan expenses, they're still expenses. So that was a big plus for a lot of businesses. I think that's going to help a lot of people out. Now, one thing I do want to point out to everybody is that right now is just at the federal level. The state of Virginia is talking about that and working on that. The legislatures, I don't think that they have come to a conclusion and voted on anything or any changes right now. So it's incredibly important that people be talking to their tax preparer, their accountant about that situation as they go through this. So that's one thing that's going on a lot. As far as activity, from what we can tell, there's still a certain amount of activity. But everybody would like more customers. Everybody's just ready for this whole thing to be over. We are continuing to, as far as what services we're providing, we are continuing to provide support to help people figure out how to get the assistance. We have had a sort of a wave of people that came in about the PPP2, which is what we call it, right? The second draw loans. But it's also brought in a number of people who are coming in for a first draw loan, which is somebody who didn't get a loan the first time, because you still can get a first draw PPP. If you didn't get a PPP loan before, you may be eligible to get one now. The requirements are a little bit different. The parameters are a little bit different, but if you haven't, then you need to please check with somebody. Call the SBDC and we'll help you figure out if you qualify and may be able to get some relief through the PPP program. We still see activity around the idle disaster loans. So we're happy to help people work on that as well. And what we're seeing is it's really a combination of all of those things. So we also are working with people to just do the basic business planning, as I mentioned a little bit earlier to the two of you. We are doing very short-term business planning work with people. How do we get through the next month, right? How do we plan for the next month? So we encourage everybody to get some assistance around that, and we're always happy to help businesses think through their personal situation.
Great. So it's a lot more triage than long-term planning at this moment, I know, for so many.
There's just no way to do long-term planning yet. Although we're hopeful that a little later in the year, as things happen, that we'll be able to start extending out how much planning and how far down the line we can start planning. But we're not. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, as
exactly.
And as the weather gets warmer, hopefully
that will help. We do anticipate that it will help. And one thing we also want to encourage businesses to do is be thinking about spring now. So if there's things that you're going to need to put in place or things you're going to need to do to be able to take advantage of an increase in activity, get that plan in place now and start thinking about what you're going to need. And again, we're happy to help any business to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Carl, I want to talk very briefly about the forgivability of paycheck protection loans and grants. Because one of the issues that we encountered very early in the process is that when they started talking about the forgiveness aspect of them, the SBA had come up with and Treasury Department had come up with like a 10-page application for forgiveness, and I tried to make heads or tails. I mean, and I'm an attorney, so I'm used to a lot of long forms, but that thing was absolutely the most confusing thing I've ever seen. So I know that we made some changes to make it easier for this forgiveness to take place, but can you talk a little bit about some of those changes and things that would help the smallest businesses and ways that, and what are the resources available to help these businesses on the back end with getting forgiveness?
Okay. Great. And I wish you hadn't have brought that one up. Yes, the initial one came out. When it came out, having been a business owner of several companies in the past, I sat there and I just went, why?
Yeah.
But I sat there and as they heard from not only constituents and everybody else, they've changed it, improved it. And I think they've got it to the point where the only other way you could do better is that if Congress had said everybody below this dollar limit is just totally forgiven. That the one-page form they've come up with people that ask for 150,000 and less is very simplistic. It gives it very clear guidelines. And if people are not sure of what they need to keep as records for, if it's payroll, it's 4 years, the others is 3 years. The SBDCs are doing a great job communicating and working with these companies to put clarification to it, so they have that information readily available. The other thing I thought that Congress, once again, I commend for, where it was written that the lenders weren't going to be held accountable. It was the borrowers that are accountable for the information and everything. That kind of helped things move easier this time around. Because the lenders felt the burden is on the borrower to show proof of everything, and they just have to make sure it looks good from that standpoint. And because the majority of the loans are sitting under 150K, that's a huge benefit to the lending institutions when the forgiveness start rolling around. Basically this summer, we'll start seeing that hit, and that will help ease up the burden so they can focus more on the larger loans. Unfortunately, the larger loans are still going to have to deal with the middle form, the EZ form, and also that very complicated 11-page form. But those had unique challenges. But I think with the new rules, and because you can retro those rules back to the first one loan that got those that got last spring and summer, it's going to really help out a lot. So that's a big plus. So once again, I commend Congress for doing that.
Well, and that $150,000 threshold really does account for most of the true small businesses, you know, mom and pop shops and things like that. So we really wanted to try to help them as best we could. So great, thanks. It's good to have some good feedback every once in a while. So now in Virginia, if small business owners have questions about the assistance programs that are available to them or need advice on what's the best for them, you know, whether they would be better off with an EIDL loan or a PPP loan or what some of the resources and grants are that might be available for them. Do you have any resources that you can point them to online or any advice to give them Eric, let's start with you about places where people should look, when they're first encountering where should I look for assistance?
So the SBDC is a fantastic place to start because we are kind of the lead on helping people figure out all of those, especially the federal assistance programs. And depending on what your business is, and we've done a whole lot of this the last 12 months, is figuring out what is the impact of using one program versus another. And whether we have people who are using multiple, the same company can use multiple potentially programs. Now, we also are keen on helping people understand what they're going to need to do if they decide to do that. We encourage that. But the record keeping can be the tricky part there. So we are also here to help, at least have the business owner understand here's the level of record keeping you're going to need to do. So any of the accounting resources, any accountants that they're working with already, or CPAs that they may be getting advice from, those are great people to talk to about this. If they have a relationship with a bank already, they definitely need to be interacting with their lender to find out what programs are available and what the process is and what that looks like, and both for the application and loan process for PPP, for example, but also what's the forgiveness process that bank looks for. Then there's a number of other people around. The chambers of commerce are usually offering lots of assistance. The local economic development teams in the different jurisdictions and localities are also have rallied around this. I know the Loudoun County and Leesburg economic development teams have spent a lot of time working with people about how to figure out where to get routed and get assistance and what to do. Oftentimes they end up sending them to us, which we're happy about. So, but the easiest way is probably just come to the SBDC and we'll help you figure out where else to go if you need to go somewhere else.
Great. One-stop shopping. That's what we'd like to hear.
We try.
Thanks so much. Carl, do you have any advice about where people should look for assistance? When they're first trying to decide what to do?
Actually, as a stepping stone before going to the SBDC, they can go to our website, sba.gov/PPP or sba.gov/coronavirus relief. And they can find the frequently asked questions that a lot of people have asked and SBA has responded to. Also, Treasury has information, and those are kind of stepping stones. So when people go talk to the SBDC, they have more clarity and ask a more reasonable question to get to a more firm answer to the different options that may be available to them.
Yeah, that's good advice, because those FAQ sheets have a lot of great information, and if it's a question that you have, somebody else probably has had it as well. Yeah. So fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, those are all the questions that I had, but I know that we have a bunch of questions from constituents. So Justin, if you want to chime in with some of those questions for our panelists, I'd really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks so much. So our first one here, question is, I realize I've made a mistake on my application. What is the best way to fix it after I've submitted it for a PPP application and also for an EIDL application?
I get those every day.
Carl, you're up.
And those hurt so bad. Anyway, when it's a payroll protection program, it depends whether, I'm not sure which area, if it's got the wrong EIN number or wrong address, whatever, wrong bank account. Those are kind of determine the difficulty of trying to fix them. But if it's a payroll protection program, you immediately go to your lender because if they haven't submitted it yet, because they have up time to submit, they can sit there and potentially fix it. And they can also notify SBA through their portal to sit there and resolve that issue. That's your payroll protection program for the quickest resolution with the lender you're working with. If you're looking for the economic injury disaster loan, basically you're going through the disaster center and basically stating what you're identifying. Please understand, if it's a EIN number or if it's a wrong bank account, I can tell you, because of all the concerns with fraud and everything, it's going to immediately get pushed over into that area. So it's going to be take longer to resolve because you're going to have to make extra steps to show proof that this is the correct number, this is who you are, everything else. So be prepared to show a lot more documentation because everybody's really concerned about the fraud issue at this point in time.
And double and triple check your EIN and your bank account routing number and everything before you submit your application, because it sounds like those are the things that really will.
It's the most common issue right now. I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten for those two issues.
Great, thank you guys.
Our next one here is I applied and was awarded EIDL funding last year. Now the money is running low and I've applied for reconsideration. Will my application still be processed after the deadline?
Well, the deadline for EIDL has, and once again, I commend Congress for realizing that this coronavirus was still ongoing as a disaster, and it's been extended till December 31st, 2021. So yes, there's plenty of time for you to submit for reconsideration. The one thing I stress to you, and I highly recommend working with the SBDC to get your true accurate numbers, what you need for reconsideration, because that's a one-shot deal. And so really make sure those numbers maximize your benefit. What I found with a number of people, they actually lowballed themselves in the first round, and now they're really in the situation where they need your help. So please work with the SBDC to kind of really get the right numbers so you can maximize your opportunities.
Great advice. Thank you.
Our next one here, my isn't being responsive, but it's where I have my business account. I want to use a different lender. Can SBA or SBDC help me find a new one? Can I switch banks after I've already applied?
On the payroll protection program, this is probably the most common complaint on the payroll protection program side, where people have applied to multiple lenders and all of a sudden they're awarded, and it's awarded from the lender they didn't want it to come from, and they want it fixed. And that is a nightmare, to put it honestly, through the situation. Because we have to identify who the lender was that awarded it, and then let the person know, and they kind of have to work with that lender to basically say, pull the loan back and say, we don't want it, so they can go to the other lender to work through it. So that's the challenge you have when you're trying to go. If you have a lender that's not responsive, yes, you can go to as many lenders you want. If you're trying to find a lender, once again, you go to our website, sba.gov, and there's a tab called Lender Match. And you can click on that and you can put in your information. And within 48 hours, you'll get an answer from a lender that's potentially interested in doing a deal with you.
That's something that I heard a lot of early in the first round, very early in the process with Paycheck Protection, because the people or the businesses that had their business at the big banks felt like they weren't getting any attention, and they weren't, because the banks had a vested interest in going with the much bigger loans, those way over $150,000 loans. And since their resources were stretched so tight very early on, they did not have those options. So I'm surprised that people, when they actually get the loan, want to claw it back and go with another lender if they've only got one, giving up that certainty to get a different bank. I guess the other lesson here is don't apply through a bank that you're not willing to go through the entire transaction with. Well,
there's just, and I will highlight that a lot of people are very upset with the bigger banks. And it's really shown, and a lot of people have really learned a lot from the smaller community banks, how they've stepped up during this very challenging time.
Well, and that's one of the reasons in the when we plussed up the first round of Paycheck Protection, I was on financial services, and we were horrified when we saw the data about the true small businesses, like how few of them actually got not to mention, especially minority and women-owned businesses really hardly got any. So we fought for those set-asides. I'm very pleased that we were able to do that. So, yep. Yeah,
it's had a positive impact, so I commend you.
And just and on top of that, we get it. The businesses are in some cases in dire straits, and there's sort of a panic that may set in. And so when you don't hear information back from the lender, you want action right now. And if they're not responding, that's a natural reaction to go, okay, well, I need this money. What do I do? So, contacting multiple lenders, absolutely, Carl's right. There's absolutely, you should do that to find out who's going to be responsive for you. And then you can choose. We do not recommend you try to apply multiple times at the same time. That's what starts to cause problems. It also we've had this problem happen, is it throws up fraud warnings on the SBA side because they see multiple applications from the same business. And of course, they're doing their due diligence as they should. And they're going, whoa, hold on, what's going on here? And that slows your process down. I know it doesn't feel like it to the business. They're just trying to get the loan into the system. But that can actually be more of a problem. So it's one of those, really have to take a deep breath, talk to the lenders. We can help you think through the process of which lender might be better. I echo what Carl says. The community banks have been fantastic through this whole thing in stepping up and coming up with programs and doing the hard work and working with these very small businesses, especially. And so they are definitely available. And SBA knows it, and they've been great at trying to help us untie some of the strange knots. So we really appreciate that. But the thing is, just think it through a little bit. I just want everybody that has a business out there to understand, we all get that this is panic time. We get it. It's dire straits.
So one of the things that we hear a lot from constituents is it's been 3 weeks. It's been, it's been 25 days. It's been almost 4 weeks now. And they feel like they're not getting any response or anything. What would you tell those people when they feel like they haven't gotten any? I mean, do we know like how long the average time is for one of these loans to be processed and get the confirmation that's been awarded?
The PPP goes fairly quickly. So pretty much if you don't have just influx, if they're doing, depending on the lender, if they're doing batch loads and things like that, if you don't have something within 72 to 96 hours, odds are you're sitting off in a queue someplace. If in idle, that's actually still within the time frame. As I tell people, in idle, it's 60 days. When the economic injury disaster loan, it's 60 days. If you don't hear something in 60 days, then be concerned. Because
that's just SBA, that's SBA processing, not hundreds and thousands of different banks doing it.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. The payroll protection program, like I said, and that's worst case scenario, 72 to 96 hours. They're usually very quick, and whatever goes into SBA, pretty much they assign a loan number within 24 hours, or they sit there and identify the problem that basically has to be resolved by the lender.
Generally speaking, it's a lot better now than it was at the beginning because the banks already have the systems and processes set up to process these loans. So that's helped a whole lot this year, right? This calendar year. Be very communicative. When you get somebody at the lender that you can talk to, ask them all kinds of questions. That's really important. Get an expectation from them about how long does their process take? Because different banks are going to take slightly different times, in part based on the amount of time team members they have on the process, right? So the smaller community banks have fewer people. Sometimes it takes a little longer to process, even though they're committed to doing it. A lot of them are using IT systems that have now been programmed to be able to do some of the basic stuff for them. So get an expectation from the bank when you talk to them, and understand that they're busy. So they would rather have you ask that question up front than not ask it and try to get in touch with them 15 times in the next 2 weeks. So that's another thing, to be very communicative with your lender at all the way through the process. And that will help you understand when you should start to see things. We've seen loans go very quickly. A lot of the other problems that have the things that can slow it down is if you don't have your documentation correct, right? If it's confusing or they're not sure or it doesn't make sense or numbers don't add up or things like that. So again, when you put in the application, go the extra mile and do the triple, quadruple checks, check your EIN number 5 times, do the math 3 or 4 or 5 times, right? Have somebody else look at it, right? All of those things to make sure, because that will help it go through the actual official process that much more quickly.
Yep. And that's one of the things when we were talking with lenders during that first round of PPP, that they were not just, waiting on guidance from Treasury and waiting on guidance from everybody. They also were trying to rewrite their systems and their software so that they would have a program that they could use in order to do this, and that interoperability so that they could, import the data from their clients' QuickBooks accounts and things like that, and be able to do it, with as seamlessly and easily and automated as possible. And it sounds like they've managed to work out a lot of those kinks now, hopefully. But that's one of the things that you want to know on the front end for sure. Great. Justin, do you have any more questions?
Yes. Our next question here comes from Merle from Lovettsville. And Merle asks, I applied for PPP during the first round and was denied because I do not file an IRS W-3. I own an agribusiness and my labor is contracted and not payroll, the rule rather than the exception in my industry. My company supports jobs in the local economy as much as any W-2 employer. Why doesn't SBA recognize 1099 employment for PPP?
So I know that for 1099 employees, that they're treated as independent contractors and they're eligible for their own paycheck protection loan program. So there was a concern that there might be double dipping happening with that kind of a situation. But I understand that it's makes for challenges for the business owners who pay their employees as contractors. But Carl, do you have any response to that or any insight why that is?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. It was about the duplication because being counted in one locality, especially independent contractors that work for multiple businesses, that just could turn into an open floodgate of double, triple counting and reaping the benefits. But the one thing is that still the operation, based on how they filed their taxes, whether they filed a Schedule C or Schedule F, if it's Block 31 of Schedule C or Block 9 of their Schedule F, they could sit there and still show revenue for them, and they could get revenue for themselves from a payroll standpoint. So that could be counted.
So for the business owners and then also could they then qualify for that assistance for the overhead and the rent or mortgage interest and things like that?
Well, that's based on what their number shows, because the payroll is tied to payroll. And so depending on what his number shows up in that Block 31 or Block 9 is basically what you divide by 12 and then multiply times 2.5, and that's your number. And so that's what it comes out to.
I see, but they couldn't apply for the full amount, including that what was paid out to contractors, but they could for their own net profits or whatever that line item. Okay.
Yeah, because the contractors can go and apply theirs and all be whole. So all of them can put their information in and be held whole and accountable to be taken care of. So that was the whole idea behind it.
Right. This is a all the time I use the phrase "it depends" for situations like this, and I hate that, but that's the truth, right? So one of the challenges is that in this area, especially, there is a very high use of independent contractors as labor for companies and all kinds of things, right? And that creates some difficulties in trying to figure some of these things out, because independent contractors, 1099s, are not employees. They are not classified as employees by anybody at the state or the federal level, the IRS, Treasury, SBA, anybody, which is a little confusing to people who may not understand that. So what it sounds like may be happening is this company does something and it needs people, but it doesn't have them as actual employees. It uses independent contractors for whatever totally legitimate reason. The unfortunate thing is that that's not the same thing under the programs as having W-2 employees, who, in which case you would have payroll paperwork like 940s and 941s and stuff like that, which is what is used to calculate the PPP loan amounts. Now, that doesn't mean that this business might not qualify for other assistance like an EIDL loan. So this is an example of, I would encourage Merle to come into the SBDC and talk to our finance person and let's see maybe what can be done. Like maybe there's some other types of assistance. This sounds like maybe a more of an EIDL situation. I don't know without looking at the details, but that gets you operating expense. EIDL is designed to get you operating expenses. Now that can be used for payroll or paying independent contractors or whatever you need to do to keep your operation going, but it's not based on payroll. PPP is designed for you to keep your payroll, your employees employed. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily designed to keep your independent contractors on contract on the job.
So in this case, employee is a term of art, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
just,
but it becomes extremely critical, right? It's a very important distinction. And of course, the ripple result of that, or the cause of that, is because if they're 1099, they get money, but then the 1099s are also able to apply for PPP directly. So then there's a potential double dip situation, which is not what was intended. And that kind of creates problems when people are trying to create things like guidance about how to use this program, right, Carl? Sure. So again, we have to follow the rules of the road. What we could maybe do is work with that business to say, how do we make sure all of your 1099 employees are applying themselves to get the assistance they can get so that you don't have to worry about paying them, right? So that keeps them whole, and then we can talk about what might keep that operation, operational. Maybe through an EIDL loan or something like that. Again, in some cases, it's not specific. It's not cut and dry. It's not always so simple. And that's why the SBDC here and other like SCORE and the other programs are here to help people kind of figure that out.
Great.
A great question, by the way. And I really appreciate that he was willing to share that.
Yeah. One of the challenges with that real quick is, where a lot of people are wanting is because the PPP, they can get forgiveness and don't pay it back. And where the EIDL, they have to pay back. But what I try to stress to people, you have 30 years to pay back. So you have a long period of time to pay that money back for your operation and to help you out. And Eric hit it perfectly. It's really for operations. And people are starting to realize that now. And that's why we're starting to see a higher demand of people trying to get EIDLs, because they realize they do need that.
Our next question here comes from Grant from Sterling, and Grant asks, what are you specifically doing to ensure the proper recipients are getting the financial support they need, and those who would attempt to obtain these funds illicitly are identified? How will these loans be paid back, and what agency is managing that process?
So I'll start with this one because transparency in anything where we're talking about public money is so important. I led the effort in the House to make sure after this first round of Paycheck Protection loans went out, and we heard about the businesses who weren't injured financially getting them. We heard about the pot bellies and the big guys coming in and taking millions of dollars away from mom and pop shops. So I led the effort in the House to require that we got reporting about the date that for businesses with multiple employers, that we had transparency when it came to what the loan amount was, when it was issued, and what the name of the businesses that received it. We also have in the House got a special committee for oversight on the coronavirus relief efforts to make sure that that those who need the relief are getting it. I know that SBA has been very, very active in going after fraudulent applications, and I know that we had a couple cases here in Loudoun where people have pled guilty and were arrested, and I think one at least was already sentenced to federal prison for fraudulently, creating shell companies to get the funds and then flee with them. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Also, one of the things that as we've talked about a little bit in the town hall so far is that we find out what the problems are with the way that it rolled out the first time, and then we try very hard in the next iteration to remedy those. We did those with really the smallest businesses, the community banks and minority depository institutions, minority lenders, to make sure that they had access to their own specific tranche of funds, so that those could go out to the smallest businesses and those who need it most. But transparency is truly one of the most important things that we can do. But Carl and Eric, I'll toss it to you about what you guys are doing on your end to ensure that those businesses who really need the relief are getting it.
Well, as you pointed out, the transparency issue, one of the things from the first round last summer and spring to this round is before, when the lender put the information in, they immediately got a loan number. Now they don't. There's at least a 24-hour wait before they get the number. And the thing is, what they do is now they're doing public record searches of the information coming in. So like that EIN number, the bank account numbers, things like that. If there's a miscue, it immediately is put on hold and it goes back to the lender. I have a hold issue. Lender, you have to go talk to the borrower and get documentation to show what is the correct information and upload it, and we'll fix it, and then we'll proceed it forward. And that's kind of where some of the challenges are showing up, especially those that got a first draw last spring and summer and trying to get a second draw right now. They're being red flagged for either EIN number wrong, they didn't pay a student loan, shows up, which means they're not supposed to get funded because they defaulted on the student loans and things like that. So there are things showing up now that didn't show up the first time, are being caught now.
Got it.
So as far as getting the word out about all of the assistance and helping people get any assistance, we have, from the very beginning, the SBDC specifically has been on social media. And we actually stood up a whole brand new website in April to focus on COVID and coronavirus information, obviously, because nobody knew anything at that point. But as the programs have come out and as the changes have happened, we have consistently and constantly been putting out social media posts. We have encouraged people to take advantage of the loans, but not just the loans and the federal level stuff, but also all the way down. The CARES Act created a lot of opportunity for state level and local level assistance programs. And so we work very closely all over the state. SBDC works very closely with our local jurisdictions to make sure that whatever programs they're doing are getting out there. We're doing webinars. Every week there's a webinar from at least one or two of the centers around the state. Often they're talking about forgiveness. They're talking about applications. I personally have done, I don't even know how many I've done since the PPP2 has come out. We've done some update videos on the IRS changes, for example. There are several panel discussions that have been going on online about that kind of stuff. So we also, maybe even more importantly, we have been partnering with all of our economic development and assistance partners. So in Loudoun County specifically, we work very closely with the Loudoun County Economic Development Department, the Leesburg Economic Development Department, Middleburg Economic Development, the Visit Loudoun, the Loudoun County Chamber, the Dulles Chamber. We've just recently started also working with the Nova Hispanic Chamber to start getting the word out into some of the communities that didn't necessarily get the message the first time. We've been participating with some other minority-owned business grants, for example, to offer support So we are very actively out into the community and interacting with people. And what we find a lot, especially in a lot of those underserved communities, is that word of mouth is the way that they find out about these things. And so we're engaging with a lot of the leaders in those communities to try to make sure they have the information and find out how we can disseminate that specific information. We want every business that can benefit or take advantage of the assistance programs to find out about it and take advantage of whatever's available to them. So that's what we've been doing on the local and state level. Just a quick plug, the virginiasbdc.org website is a great place for people to start. There's a lot of recorded information there. There's also where you can register for classes. One of the advantages of the virtual environment is that all of our centers have been doing classes, and because they're all virtual right now, anybody from anywhere in the state can take a class at any center. So that's been a big benefit for us to be able to have lots of different expertise that, like here in Loudoun, I encourage people to take advantage of all the expertise from the other centers as well. So that's been big. And then we actually have a recovery page on the state site that has lots of guidance for not only general guidance for businesses as they go through this, but industry specific guidance about their particular industry that comes from the industry groups and things like that. So hopefully that answered the question.
Great. Thanks so much.
Next, we have one from the Facebook comment section. And this question is, are there any updates on the opening of the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant?
I always get at least one question about that one. At this point, no, it's they have not set the date when they're going to finally get it out. What they're trying to do is give everybody the chance to get themselves registered in SAM to get, so they have to get a DMB number in SAM. That's the management system for government contracting and grants. And because this is a grant, you have to get yourself in that system. It's fairly easy. There's no cost to get a DMB number. It shows you how to do it. And so that's kind of why the thing hasn't really rolled out. It's really trying to get all these entities that are not potentially looking at this, get themselves in that system. So then that way, when it does roll out, they can move forward very quickly. We don't want anybody to be left behind because they're still trying to get themselves into the SAM system. And like I said, the SBDCs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers that are available can help people get through that system just the same way with the Small Business Development Centers to get people into that system.
VirginiaPTAC.org. They're fabulous. They're a sister program for us. We work a lot with them on the federal procurement side with businesses, and absolutely they are the experts in how to navigate getting what you need to do to get in the SAM system for any of the businesses that are looking at the Shuttered grant at this point.
So, Carl, I have to ask though, do you have any idea of when? I mean, as far as the timeline is concerned, because I know that you know, even as we're just talking about, like, you know, a 1 week business plan and things like that. Do you have any?
No, I like I said, we've been told, you know, nothing confirmation. I'm just basing on kind of what I see is coming through with the FAQs, kind of setting things up to get it ready. And I think what they're really doing right now is, because it's only been in the last week that they've really started pushing the SAM issue. So I think what they're doing is giving people that time to get themselves in there. So when it does roll out, people are ready to go and they're not behind, because that's the biggest thing right now. If people start having problems at SAM, then it's really going to create a lot of problems for them to move forward. So they're trying to get this phase out because it's new to a lot of organizations and they've never had to deal with this. So they're trying to make sure they do that right.
Well, and I guess also to have some idea of what we're looking at when the uptake does take place, right? I mean, just to have some idea what we're in for so that we don't have things crashing, I guess, too.
Well, the other thing is that people, you know, we've had a lot of people contact us, do I qualify? And, you know, and as we try to stress to them, you know, talk to your SBDC, but we see those that are legitimate ones. The FAQs have done a really nice job. I think the one that has been the greatest confusion is the wedding venues, trying to determine if they meet the criteria or not because of how firm the guidelines are. So there are some that will meet the criteria, but there are many that will not. And so those are kind of some of the things that are cropping up right now that people are asking.
Well, for those of us in Loudoun and the areas around here where we have a lot of wedding venues and agritourism, venues like that, that's something that is near and dear to our hearts. So if there's anything you need statutorily, please let us know. Thanks.
Our next question here is, I started a small business in February 2020 and got an EIDL loan in advance. We closed the business on November 30th, 2020 as we were running into loss. My question is specific to businesses that were closed during the pandemic. Are we eligible for any programs that SBA is currently offering for closed businesses?
Well, we haven't offered anything with the closed businesses, but the EIDL loan that you got for whatever amount you got for basically had a year's deferment. So in reality, it's a program you're going to have to pay back. And so when that rolls around for when the payments start, that's when you'll work up your plan with SBA. And if the business is closed, at that point, you inform them and they will come work an agreement eventually what that final number is going to be that you'll have to pay back to them.
Great, we've got one more here. What recourse does an employee have when her boss does not distribute PPP money to the employees and refuses to discuss how the money was spent?
Well, this one is one that makes me angry, and I hear it a lot. And so because it's the whole reason for this program was to keep employees on the payroll and keep businesses open. So if an employer is getting the Paycheck Protection Program loan based on the payroll amounts and then isn't distributing it on to employees, that is something that it was definitely against the congressional intent. Carl, is there any recourse for these employees? And do you know is this something that SBA would claw the money back, or is it just something that they would have to pay it back as a loan rather than a grant?
Well, with the challenge with this, with the payroll protection, the lender is the one that makes the decision if the employees were paid properly. If an employee feels they didn't get compensated, which I've had several cases where people contacted said they weren't being paid what they were before during the time period in that. At that point, they can inform the SBA's Inspector General about this potential issue, and they will take the information, and at that point, they will, once that company puts their information with the lender and submits it through, they will investigate to determine if they did follow the guidelines properly, if they did not. But people can reach out to the SBA's Inspector General and inform them that they feel the funds were not used properly. But they will have to have some type of documentation, like my paycheck was less. Here's my payroll statement, shows I'm making less than what I did previously, and those type things. So that's what has to be pointed out.
Wonderful. Great. Well, it's hard to believe it's been an hour already. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to join us today. I learned a ton. I hope our viewers at home did as well. I really, really appreciate your taking the time on a Saturday morning to join us. Eric Bird, Carl Knobloch, thank you guys so much for all that you're doing to help keep our communities thriving and help our small businesses. I just really, really appreciate it. Everybody at home, please stay safe. Continue to practice social distancing, mask up, double mask if you can. We'll get through this together, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.